Good afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are tuning in from. This is the Radix Recap. My name is Adam Simmons. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at the Radix Foundation. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in on this Friday afternoon for me. If you're tuning in live from X, if you're listening in from Spotify or on YouTube, welcome as well from the past. So today we have a whole bunch of updates to go through. Things are really heating up here for Radix. We've got some big news coming very, very soon with major projects and updates hitting. And the ecosystem has been going absolutely bonkers for the last 2 weeks since we last had one of these spaces. Unfortunately, Andy can't join me today. He is otherwise occupied. So it is unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you ask, just me. So excuse the monologue for a while. As always, if you're joining live on X and you'd like to come up and ask any questions or have a chat, feel free to request that mic. It'd be great to answer some people's questions. But to kick things off, first and foremost, let's go through some of the stuff happening from the Radix Foundation side and what we've got going on here. So, firstly, and probably the one on top of everyone's mind is Hyperlane. So, the Hyperlane integration, as frequent listeners will know, wrapped up a couple of weeks ago in terms of their technical integration. We had a slight delay on getting the technical audit started versus the initial timelines that were penciled in for that. So, that kicked off a week ago. It was scheduled in for a week, so that will be concluding today. But that will not officially conclude until the end of the day. So they're doing a fantastic job. Clearly, the auditors have dived in really, really deep for all of the code. I'd also like to shout out those in the Radix community who've looked over the Hyperlane integration code. They open sourced that this time last week, and I know a bunch of Radix people have taken a look at that. Actually, no, 2 weeks ago. It's been that long already. And I know a bunch of Radix people have put some thoughts into that and given some kind of code suggestions to it. And I do believe that even some of those comments on the code have already been actioned. I know at least Beam has left an update on there that Hyperlane have actioned. Good news on the audit. Obviously, it is not concluded yet. So this all goes with the usual pinch of salt that nothing's final till it's final. But so far, there's been a couple of kind of minor issues, but no critical issues flagged as of yet. Those issues that have been flagged earlier in the week, the Hyperlane team have been absolutely on it, and they have already implemented the changes, ready to go on their side. So they're already being reviewed internally by the Hyperlane team and are actioned. So where does that leave us with Hyperlane? So the intended plan is that by end of day, Zelek will come back with their full audit and all of their findings kind of written up, including the ones that Hyperlane already know about. Then on Monday, Hyperlane will have back to them basically all the proposed fixes, assuming there aren't any others that weren't flagged earlier in the week as changes. They will then go back and go and give those a review. And that review process is mainly a check of any code changes to make sure that it solves any edge cases or issues that they had. So far, as I say, these issues have been non-critical issues, so things that are good to have, avoid some edge cases and some states you wouldn't want, but not things that affect funds. So that is appealing for the timelines and a good bit of news, and also just testament to the great work that the Hyperlane team have done on a very, very quick turnaround with their integration for Radix. The process then is on Monday, while Zelek are reviewing all of the code changes that are going through, is Hyperlane will begin their rollout onto the Radix mainnet. And getting a little bit technical here, but what that means is that the various different blueprints will be instantiated on the Radix mainnet. I know some people have already tested these. I can say like Tiemann's in the channel. I know he's done some tests already on the StokeNet to Ethereum testnet, doing bridging and some bridging through Hyperlane testnets elsewhere as well. So that's all there. That basically gets deployed up on the Radix mainnet. It'll have the changes from the audit already applied. So hopefully that'll be the canonical version that's used. So that'll take a few days for them to roll that out and do their internal testing on that. Upon completing that internal testing, then the next things that need to get done is we need to get a response from Zelek on the code changes, that the things that they flagged during this audit are acceptable to them and close the issues that they had. Once that is done, the final step to Hyperlane being live and supported for all of you here to start bridging assets from that 150 plus chains is to basically have the Hyperlane validators sign to enroll Radix as a kind of public integration. that is the point at which once they have done that, then the Hyperlane team can add Radix, and any other front ends can add the Radix routes into their UIs, and you'll be able to bridge assets into and out of Radix. So the good news is that from a technical perspective, all of those things are still on track. So we're still looking in a position where launching that towards the end of next week is plausible. I'll be honest, it is a very tight timeline. While obviously we wanted to get this live by the end of August, as I said, we had a slight delay in getting the technical audit started on that. So while technically everything's good to go, we've got to get the results back from that, which is certainly doable, but is not guaranteed. That's got to get back and those code changes approved for these Hyperlane nodes to enroll Radix as part of the entire bridging system. And that as well requires a bunch of parties that aren't Hyperlane to basically enroll that in there. So a bit of, in simple terms, consensus stuff for nodes to accept that update to the Hyperlane protocol to accept Radix. Those things are doable by the end of next week, but does mean that everything basically needs to go to plan. So we are still confident that it's very, very close. It is still possible for it to be done by the end of next week, but I don't want to pull wool over anyone's eyes that this is a very, very tight timeline. So internally, we're planning on everything being live on Hyperlane at the end of next week, and then incentives launching straight off the back of that. There is the possibility, though, that something on a third party means that we can't get that done there, in which case it'd be the following week. Now, assuming everything goes live at the end of next Friday, there's also a whole bunch of stuff going on. So myself and a bunch of the Radix team aren't going to get a weekend next weekend because we're planning to get all of the H assets, so the Hyperlane wrapped assets, supported within the incentives program. It's really important, and I think everyone here will agree that it is critical that day one of the incentives program has Hyperlane assets supported. And so there's a few steps that kind of go into making that happen. The first is obviously we need initial liquidity bridged over Hyperlane to exist on the Radix side. So the first bit is like literally just a nominal amount so that the, say like HUSDC or HETH is existing on Radix. So the asset is actually created. Then we need to have enough of those assets to bootstrap the first liquidity pools on the Radix dexes. Once they are kind of bootstrapped and there's some liquidity in those, that gets us the component addresses that we then need to incorporate into the incentives program, Radix rewards, so that we can track LP positions there and that we can also track trading activity through those. Once that's done, then the money markets, so WEFT and Root, they need those DEX pools, obviously for any potential liquidations or things like that. And the asset addresses, they can then incorporate those into their platforms to support the major assets on day one. And then we can add those components into the Radix rewards program so that any deposits into the lending and borrowing platforms are also detected there. We're steaming ahead for all of those things to be done by Sunday night. And then Sunday night, late, the Radix incentives program will go live and season 1 of Radix rewards will start. So that's very, very exciting. Obviously, there is still the risk that some of these things are dependent on other people and not purely technical. So if for whatever reason we can't get that live by the end of Sunday night, it will roll to the next week because of the way the Radix incentives work is on like a weekly cadence. It has to go live on a Sunday night in order to start at basically midnight UTC on the Monday morning and run for the 7-day period. So we're doing absolutely everything possible, working the weekend to make sure that that's there. There are unfortunately just a few things that, while they should be doable, aren't completely within our control or Hyperlane's control to be able to do that. So rest assured, we're doing everything we can there. I also want to massively shout out all of the DEXs, all of the money markets, and many other people in the Radix developer ecosystem who have been doing things to get ready for this. They are lined up, ready to go as soon as Hyperlane's ready, which means that we can be ready as quickly as possible with Radix rewards. So a big thank you to all of the teams that I've had calls with in the last week or two around this to get these times sorted. Another part of that, of course, is getting that initial liquidity over. So this is kind of the BD side of things, so to speak. So while Hyperlane is open, permissionless, and anyone can bridge assets over, another thing that we're doing just to make sure this launch goes in a smooth way is that we've had outreach with a couple of liquidity providers. So people who are prepared to bridge over larger amounts of money through Hyperlane and bring that kind of predominantly BTC, USDC, USDT, and ETH, and seed those first DEX pools across the Radix ecosystem. Now, the main reason for this, and this is something just for everyone tuning in to be aware, is while anyone can make a pool on DEXs, the initial liquidity that comes in, the deeper that liquidity, the more concentrated that liquidity, the less slippage you'll have on any trading that kind of goes on there. Now, when the pools are first bootstrapped, you want that first bit of liquidity to be meaningful enough that those pools don't get out of whack really, really quickly. And if you are adding liquidity early on, important bit of advice for anyone who does anything in DeFi, make sure when you're adding that liquidity that you're setting the ranges that you want that liquidity in to be right. Because obviously if the pool is out of balance, and you go and add a whole bunch of liquidity, someone could then ARB that back to the macro price of those blue chip assets. So we're making sure that we've got people lined up as soon as Hyperlane's ready to bridge over the kind of first bootstrapping liquidity to get those pools set up so that it is a more stable position for any other liquidity providers that come in after that. We're going to get that done all before the incentives start, so that they don't get any advantage or anything like that. And obviously Hyperlane will be open for anyone else who wants to come in. But that means that there'll be an orderly time, hopefully over next weekend, where everyone who wants to bridge assets, myself included, will then be able to just use the open Hyperlane network to bridge over any assets they want. And initially, we're going to be supporting warp routes for... Basically, warp routes are the way Hyperlane call basically their different bridge routes for different assets. So we'll be supporting routes from Ethereum L1, Arbitrum, Base, and BSC. And we will initially set up warp routes, or the Hyperlane team are going to be setting up warp routes from each of those networks for USDC, USDT, Ethereum, and Wrap Bitcoin. Those are the ones that obviously we already have X assets for, and I'll speak a bit more on that based on today's news in a moment. But those will get set up first, and then the plan after that is to very quickly off the back of that add in bridging support for Solana and other chains on top of that, as well as other assets as well. And we'll basically roll those out as we're doing it with the incentives campaign, so that we keep adding more assets, more pools, more dApps, more activities in the Radix ecosystem with more assets supported through the incentives program. So that's all coming along nicely. The expression, which I hope some of you here will get, is it's very much a case at the moment of herding cats. There's lots of kind of dependencies and codependencies on these things that all need to come together. And as I said, very tight timeline, but we're still aiming for that August 31st evening launch of the Radix incentives program. Other things to touch on, kind of semi-foundation updates. So it's not really a foundation update because it's not the foundation, but a big bit of news from the ecosystem today was InstaBridge announced that it is going to be closing down its service. So if you haven't read their blog post about it, check the Radix Telegram. Loads of people have been sharing that. So take a look there. But basically, InstaBridge was originally created at the launch of the Radix network to offer a centralized permissioned route to bridge assets into the Radix network and out of the Radix network in a very regulatory compliant way. Over time, they found that there's been a big uptick in the amount of use of decentralized bridges as being the preference for kind of crypto communities, and less of an uptick on this need for regulatory compliant bridging. And so they've taken the decision at InstaBridge that with the launch of Hyperlane, this is not something that is going to be viable because Hyperlane is there as a trustless, permissionless route into and out of Radix for all of these different assets. So what does that mean for people holding X assets? So this is something that we are acutely aware of the foundation side. And so we've made sure that there's some contingencies in place for that. So the first thing is InstaBridge doesn't shut down immediately. They are open as normal for bridging and unwrapping any assets on the Radix network for the X assets up until I believe it's the 8th of September. So that's a good couple of weeks until now. In the same vein, we've also got a third party to release a dApp called XHSwap.io. And so XHSwap is a super simple dApp where if you've got X assets, when the Hyperlane bridge goes live, this third party is going to deposit H assets into there. So let's say HUSDC, and you will be able to take your X USDC if you wish to and deposit that into it like a swap on a DEX and get one-to-one out. So it's not like a DEX in the traditional sense because there's no automated market maker logic behind or liquidity pools in the same sense. It's literally just you deposit one X USDC or one X ETH, you get one H USDC or one H ETH out of XHSwap.io. Also aware that some people in the community flagged as well around EXRD. So EXRD, there is a bit of supply of that still in the Ethereum ecosystem. A large portion of that is from entities that the foundation is aware of, and a small number of them, and predominantly providing liquidity in a Uniswap pool for it. But there is still holders of EXRD there. And InstaBridge was one of the routes that you could swap EXRD to XRD natively. There are other routes. So Bitfinex also supports depositing EXRD and withdrawing XRD. So does MXC. But obviously losing InstaBridge was quite rightfully flagged. That means that there's only 2 centralized exchanges that are third parties supporting that. So I've already been in touch with the people who are operating XHSwap, and there is no technical limitation to being able to provide a way to swap EXRD into XRD. That's something that they're looking at now, but they're very, very confident that's going to be able to be supported before the 8th of September when InstaBridge goes offline. The exact mechanism of that is going to be a little bit janky because obviously EXRD is on Ethereum. So the exact route will probably be something like you have to take your EXRD on Ethereum, put it into Hyperlane. Hyperlane is setting up a warp group for that. They'll then bridge over to Radix as, let's say, HEXRD. And then you'll be able to deposit that HEXRD into XHSwap and get out native XRD. And then they will go and bridge it the other way and burn the EXRD on the native side. On the Ethereum side. So all of this means that there'll be a decentralized route to do that. Obviously, everyone is still able to go and use InstaBridge up until the 8th of September if they want to bridge their X assets before that point. But all in all, this will be very smooth. On the incentive side as well, we will have equal points being earned for X assets and H assets. So it doesn't matter which one you're providing liquidity for when the campaign launches. So there's no rush to switch for the incentives campaign or anything like that. The way it actually works technically behind the scenes is we'll have, say you're providing liquidity on a DEX for the pool like XRD and XUSDC. That will award you points for a category, basically DEX stablecoin liquidity is what the category is. In that same category will also be XRD HUSDC. And so they will earn points at exactly the same rate in exactly the same way. It doesn't matter if one's got more liquidity than the other. $1 in one will count the same as $1 in the other for earning points. And that means that there should be a really smooth transition. There's no rush to do anything on either side there. And obviously XHSwap will be up and running with the X assets and H assets in the very near future once Hyperlane goes live. So hopefully that'll make things a lot smoother and that transition easy if people do want to transition. Final foundation update from my side is the other bit, which I know there's been a lot of discussion on in the community, is around market making activity on centralized exchanges. So a little bit of a look behind the curtain on how market makers operate. So market makers are ultimately market neutral is their purpose. So their job is not to speculate on price movements, but just facilitate any buyers or sellers of any asset to be able to do so very, very quickly and very, very easily with low or reasonable slippage amounts. When a token has high volatility, as XRD has obviously on the news with Dan, and likewise with potential good news coming up with like Hyperlane and the incentives program, as soon as they start seeing volatility within the market, naturally a market neutral force pulls out liquidity from the market to protect their underlying collateral. So when you have very volatile markets, you usually see those market makers and ultimately the amount of liquidity and depth on markets decrease until that volatility stabilizes in the longer term. So we've been in daily discussions with the market makers for XRD around this across all the different exchanges. And we're going to be starting to ramp that up now that the news around Dan has been out for about a month now, but also the kind of wider market volatility that we've seen in the last week also seems to be stabilizing out. So this will be a scale up over the next kind of week to 2 weeks or so, back to normal levels on that as well. Obviously, that is assuming that volatility stays on the lower side. They will still be cautious. That is ultimately their job, to protect the underlying market making capital and be neutral on that. And that is something that you will be seeing hitting all the different centralized exchanges over the next kind of week or so and seeing that pick up. So that is all ongoing. There are, as I say, many spinning plates, many cats to herd. The team is working flat out to get all of these things lined up. And yeah, the timelines are tight, but we're still aiming for this kind of big launch next weekend. So it's going to be busy. I hope everyone is ready. I'm really excited about the stuff that's going to be coming out over these next 2-week period. Genuinely, the launch of Hyperlane and the incentives campaign coinciding is the biggest single event for Radix probably since the Babylon mainnet upgrade. Having a completely permissionless open source bridge to get assets into and out of Radix is huge. It means that initially those first assets being bridged across with warp routes have far less friction to get them in and out of the ecosystem, which is a massive win. And also with the incentives, there's far more of a reason for people to bring those assets across into Radix. And so between those two things, I'm optimistic and hopeful around what we're going to see in terms of TVL, in terms of ecosystem activity, both in the short term and over the long term for this. And that is ultimately what we're striving for with all of this, is to build good long-term momentum around Radix, around the ecosystem, which time and time again, every third party, every kind of B2B contact I have in the space, whenever they come and look at Radix, go, holy shit, the Radix ecosystem is awesome. Like, for a relatively small chain, you have such a breadth of dApps, but also such high quality dApps. So that is testament to many of the builders that I see tuning in here today. Incredible work. So really looking forward to what this can bring. It is going to be very exciting. And that's it for foundation updates. The other side is, of course, the ecosystem updates. And everyone's been extremely busy here as well over the last 2 weeks. So some of these updates you may have seen already coming through on the Monday Radix Recap X article. So they go out every week, whereas this space is every 2 weeks. But yeah, a bunch of stuff has come through. So first up on the list, we have XRD Vision V2 was released. So XRD Vision is a dashboard for lending, borrowing, and liquidity pools. They currently support WEF, Root, and Surge. They probably rolled out one of the coolest promo videos that I've seen from the Radix ecosystem. So big congratulations to the XRD Vision team for that. Definitely go and check that out. Visualization tools, dashboards are a major part of any DeFi ecosystem and become increasingly important when things get more complicated, as you're wanting to check your portfolios, your positions, different opportunities within the space, and seeing more of those pop up as the ecosystem matures, and especially as Hyperlane and also the incentives program kick off, is going to be really important as new people come into the ecosystem and are looking for the opportunities that are here. Next on my list is XRDGen. So XRDGen have launched I'm not sure if it's a new Discord channel or just a big update to their existing one, but they've added a whole bunch of features into their Discord where they've got an integration in with X where you can automatically like retweet, quote tweet and things directly from Discord. They're also going to be implementing token gated channels and internal incentives for participants there. So that's again another way for the ecosystem to get involved and the community to get involved with the ecosystem. And they've also announced their phase 2 for XRDGen's NFT marketplace with a whole bunch of UI upgrades, whitelisting, mint phases, tiered pricing, mint staking, an airdrop tool, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So congratulations to Machinist and the team over at XRDGens for doing that. It is looking super sweet. Of course, it wouldn't be a Radix recap without mentioning Astrolescent. So Astrolescent are, of course, well known within the Radix community and beyond now, actually, thanks to their bridging. So Astrolescent has two main services that they offer the Radix ecosystem and other ecosystems. In Radix, they have the ability to be a DEX aggregator, so you can swap any Radix token to any other Radix token, and they are an aggregator across all the different DEX pools to get an efficient route across there for you. But what probably most of you, or maybe not most of you, but people will be potentially more familiar with is Astrolescent is also a front end to a bunch of bridges. So the big one here, and huge congratulations to the Astrolescent team, is that they have hit $4 million in total bridged volume across the Astrolescent bridge. Absolutely phenomenal milestone. That is doing a huge amount of traffic currently across Maya and also across RocketX. Those are cross-chain swaps rather than unwrapping bridges. I know they support a list of chains that is too long for me to rattle off quickly here, but they've been doing some fantastic work for both supporting a whole range of different chains, a whole range of different assets to cross-chain swap into XRD, including some wallet integrations that aren't natively even supported on Maya or RocketX. So that's fantastic. I'm not going to say anything more about what they may do with bridging, but I'm sure some people could make some guesses based on what we've been chatting around today. Radix Hub have also deployed another update. So Radix Hub, for those of you who don't know, is a mobile app which basically gives you a bunch of information and news about Radix and different things and different dApps and things you can do within there. Really well designed, really well built, and it's got some new features launched, which include a token watch list, an NFT search, really fun integration, a Radix charts integration, and they've started promoting the Radix incentives campaign as well, and I'm sure they've got some fun things planned for that as well. Atos Earn are getting ready to launch as well. So Atos Earn is, of course, built by the one and only Beam. He's working on a coordinated launch with the incentives campaign. And he shared a couple of sneak peeks with the community. So make sure that you check those out as well. But Atos Earn has got is essentially a strategy aggregator for DeFi. So you can automatically deploy into different pools, see different opportunities, do some more complex DeFi strategies there. So launching that alongside the incentive campaign makes a lot of sense, because there's going to be potentially a lot of people coming in looking at Radix for the first time, looking for where they can deploy capital that they bridged over in Hyperlane into the Radix ecosystem to generate yield, and looking to do that in an easy and convenient way. And that is exactly what Atos Earn does. Second to last update from the ecosystem is the Proven Network by Flight of Fox have announced that their testnet is going to be coming this year. This has mainly been spoken about in their Telegram, so it's not been hugely spoken through. It's also on their website, proven.network, but definitely go and take a look at the Proven Telegram if you haven't, because what Proven is doing with trusted execution environments is super cool and pretty unique. It's also a really hot area of DLT tech, is how to use TEEs, as they are called. I know Flight of Fox has spoken to me on many times and has done an amazing job of giving me some ELI 5s of what TEEs do and how they can be utilized. But super exciting. If you're not already chatting in the Proven Network Telegram, I'd definitely go and join that, because it's a great group and it's a really exciting project that is building alongside Radix. And then my final update from the ecosystem today is a shout out to Ratanode and Radix Planet. So those are two nodes that run on validators for the Radix network, and they have just released 2 open source blueprints that allow delegated control of certain validator actions, such as like unregistering a node without changing its metadata or being able to influence what owner stake actions can be done. If you're not a node runner, that may sound a little confusing. Long story short is it just gives some open source tools and Radix blueprints that the node runner community can utilize to make their job a little bit easier and allow some more granular interactions there. And so fantastic work to Ratanode and Radix Planet for doing that. These tools that are put into the ecosystem may not mean something to everyone, but for those who do utilize them, they're incredibly powerful. And I'm always a massive fan of shouting out projects, contributors, individual developers who build these open source tools or libraries. There's been quite a few throughout Radix's history that make all devs and the entire ecosystem on Radix function just a little bit more smoothly. So congratulations to them and thank you. And also a shout out to Faraz for flagging that to me as well. Faraz does a huge amount behind the scenes for the node runner community on Radix and is a invaluable help towards the Radix Foundation for that. So don't say it enough, but thank you very much Faraz for everything that you do there. And I know that all the node running community will be very familiar with all the stuff Faraz does. So thank you for that. And that in near record time, probably for the amount of things I had to cover, was maybe record time. I think I've got through the main list of things that were on my side. I'll take a quick look through any of the replies onto this space, but of course if anyone wants to come up and ask a question, feel free to request a mic. You've got a couple of minutes if you're quick. So yeah, Team and confirming XRD Vision is super cool to give it a try. We've got Tiemann as well, also saying that DeFi Plaza's Calm algorithm is a great place to add liquidity, as of course is OsciSwap and Caviar 9 and any other dexes that I'm forgetting. And yeah, a bunch of other questions and stuff we can come back to, and some good memes. I'll give a final shout out for an opportunity for anyone to request the mic. Otherwise, with all my spinning plates that I currently have and cats that I need to herd, I think we'll wrap up in a nice 30-minute Spaces session. As always, you can always find out more about Radix on radixdlt.com, in the Radix Telegram, on the Radix X account, x.com at radixdlt, and get ready, guys, because we're in the running to kick off with Hyperlane and also incentives. And yeah, I'd just like to close out by once again thanking the incredible team, very small team on the foundation, who have been absolutely cooking with getting incentives to the position it is, with all the stuff they're doing there, to the Hyperlane team for the incredible speed they got up to with the Radix tech and getting this out, and everything they're doing to push to get this live in time, and to, of course, all the Radix ecosystem for all of the amazing things that they are building, and also all of the help that they have given to make sure that this rollout of the incentives program and Hyperlane goes as smoothly as possible, as quickly as possible. It's an exciting time to be a Radvocate, and on that note, thank you, and speak to you all soon.